All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I just want to extend a special thanks to Gigi and ColorComm for giving We Communications an opportunity to have this important and timely conversation. My name is Elizabeth Herrera Smith, and I am the head of DEI for We Communications. I've been doing this role for about 9 months, so I'm actually an example of someone who made a big career switch during the pandemic. And it turns out that I'm not alone. I'm sure, like me, many of you have been seeing the headlines of what's being called the Great Resignation. You may also be feeling the impact of the Great Resignation within your own organizations. According to the Labor Department, 4 million Americans quit their job in April. Can you believe that? In April, 4 million people quit their jobs. And in a recent survey by career site Monster, they found that 95% of workers are currently considering changing jobs, with 92% willing to switch industries to land a new position. As we begin to emerge from the pandemic and a year plus of lessons and perspectives, many people are using this moment to re-examine their lives and really think about what matters most to them. They're using it as a springboard for change. So today, I am honored to be joined by two powerful women who have reinvented themselves throughout their careers. They will be sharing with you some of the lessons they've learned along the way, as well as some practical guidance as you consider your own career journeys. I'm joined by Marlene McClinton, President of World Direct Communications. As a former two-time Emmy Award-winning journalist, Marlene used that experience to create her own production company and has worked with a range of organizations from the Houston airport system all the way to serving as honorary consul general for the West African nation, the Republic of Cote d'Ivoire. Marlene's communication career spans decades, and I'm really looking forward to exploring the twists and turns of your multifaceted career. So welcome, Marlene.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
We also have joining us today, Tomi Tellaby, Senior Product Communications Manager at Pinterest and co-founder of the Black Beauty Market, a community of over 35,000 members interested in the culture and community of beauty. While Tomi started in fashion, she has done everything from launching an award-winning Gen Z e-commerce brand to revamping comms at Bobbi Brown Cosmetics. She's also led influencer relations and communications for smart mattress company 8 Sleep. Tomi's career really represents that intersection of culture and technology. So welcome, Tomi.
Thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me.
All right, just a quick programming note that we will reserve the last 10 to 15 minutes of this conversation for Q&A from the audience. So with that, let's dive in and have the audience get to know you a little bit better. I'm going to throw the first question to you, Marlene. When you were first starting out, how did you begin to build your professional brand, and what did you do to stand out?
All right, Elizabeth, thank you very much for the question. Let me just say that I am going to rely heavily on notes this morning so as not to have a boomer babbling session going on today. So just be mindful of that. But let me start out by saying that I wanted to be a biologist. I couldn't hack the math. And so in college, I took some elective courses in communications, and a career was born. I'll skip my first internship at WTTG, the story behind that, because ultimately it's one of those stories that if we have story time later, I will finish for you. But in the interim, I have been a broadcast journalist, news journalist, and a reporter. I've also been a media relations representative for the 4th largest airport system in the country, the 6th largest in the world, an adjunct professor at the University of Houston. I created my own production company, became the representative of the West African nation of Cote d'Ivoire, as Elizabeth said, morphed my production company into a communications company that dealt with crisis communications, let's say media training, visual storytelling, and content writing. I'm going to focus primarily on the field real quickly, where I spent most of my career, which is in broadcast media. Goals are important. I set my goal to be an award-winning reporter before I became an anchor. I wanted the big bucks, but I didn't want anybody to be able to say you got the job because you had a pretty face back when I was young. And so I was always available. Whatever they wanted me to do, this was a different time, but whatever they wanted me to do, whenever they wanted me to do it, I would do it. And that is the beauty of youth. That's morning shows, you know, overnight calls, anything to hone my craft. And the idea was to be a good storyteller. I took instruction well, and I listened. Key event, I made an investment in myself. In my 3rd job, I went ahead and hired an agent. And I think I was making $26,000. He took 10% of my gross income. And I was required to fly to New York twice a year to meet with him and to meet with a talent coach. And this was very, very important because one of the things we spent time working on was voice. Someone had made the comment, or several people, that my voice was strident, and also that I tended to over enunciate. I don't know if you all remember Carol Simpson, but she was known for her enunciation. That was a long time ago. But anyway, we worked very, very hard on the voice, and ultimately, one of the things people say to me now is, you have a very distinctive voice. And that has allowed me to do intermittent voiceovers, documentaries, etc. It doesn't mean that I can't alter it, but it's a voice that I can use, and that is acceptable. And I knew that the metamorphosis was pretty much underway when I came back from New York. And after the newscast, my general manager called me in. He said, I don't know what you're doing, but you've become a very good anchor. So you know that you've made a point. Lastly, advice. Pay close attention to upskilling yourself and reskilling yourself. Learn as much as you can from everybody, and that is from, you know, the janitor and the receptionist to the sales department to the C-suite, if that's what we're still calling it. Invest in yourself, whatever. Find the money, take the time, get a hobby, learn a language, join a professional group, and do pro bono work if you have to, because good work is good branding. Otherwise, it's just window dressing.
That is quite a journey, Marlene. And what I heard very loud and clear from you is that you were very convicted in the goals that you had set for yourself, and gave yourself focus on what you needed to build in order to achieve those goals. So Tommy, I'm going to turn it over to you now and ask you, were you clear on your goals as you were beginning your professional journey? Or do you have a different way that you approached building your professional brand when you were first starting out?
Yeah, I think it's a little much more different for me. I wouldn't say that it would be dishonest to say that I was, very aware of my image building. But I think in hindsight, for me, was more of consistency, right? I think that whatever you stand for, whoever you are, will show up intentionally or unintentionally. I think that when I began my career, whether it was in like the fashion PR space, as I went through it, whether it was through e-com at Boohoo, I was very passionate through PR, through technology, whether it was in beauty. One thing I was very passionate about was like music, culture, pop culture, and especially like Black people and diversity and things like that. So I think those are the things that kind of like show up in the work that I do. I'm not someone who's very like surface level or very into small talk. So the work that I do has to have like deep meaning in how it shows up. So for example, if I was to like host an event or do an event, it would have to, when people showed up to that event, it has to be a very diverse type of group of people. You have to have met people from all different types of walk of life. And people would say things like, oh, that was the most diverse event that I attended. That is a representation of who I am, right? So for example, if like Boohoo, Bobby Brown, for example, like partnered with Yara Shahidi, the content will be shot by Tyler Mitchell. That's an example of the kind of person I am. Most recently, we just saw that, Pierre Mars did a show recently that was, it's just two days ago at, what do you call it, at phenomenal show for haute couture that was by Mali Magic, right? And it was also by an amazing friend of mine. But the thing is, this has been like years in the making, things that I have been working on for years, right? So Molly Thomas functioned on that, Bobby Brown functioned on that. Those are things that I would put in work, so that's a representation of who I am. When I worked at UGG, we worked with Street Etiquette. Those are brands that I've worked with, and Black people have to show up in those spaces. So I think that those are the consistent things that I've worked on. So if you want cultural currency, if you want diversity, and those are the kind of things that you represent, that's how you kind of stand out as a professional person. And that's what you should, that's how you should show up wherever you work at ultimately. And so that's how I like to show up, and, throughout the pandemic, I no longer worked at the technology company, and I was like, well, how do I show up my community? And that's when I launched the Black Beauty Club and the Black Beauty Market, right? And I showed up for my community that way, and we grew our community by 35,000 people. So that's how you create your brand, and it's by being consistent, so whether you're being unintentional about it, that was being intentional, but over the past years, I grew my image, that was not intentional, but it still showed up through my work, and then it's how do you talk about it when you go to your interview? How do you talk about it when you are with your peers? And how do your peers talk about you when you're not there, right? And then they feed that back to you. So initially, unintentionally, I wasn't aware. But when your friends tell you about your work, when your peers tell you about your work, when they tell you, I love this about the things that you do, that's when you start to actually say, that's who I am. That's what I do, because initially, sometimes you're not really aware. You're just kind of like moving through the space, right? And you're like, okay, so this is who I am. And then you start to like pen those things down, because a lot of times you don't really know what you're doing. But I think that at the highest form of the extreme idea of branding yourself is kind of like parallel with social media. When we first started, Marlene can attest to this, your professional branding is just the work that you do. It's the last press hit that you get, your last press placement, your last event that you do. But today it's all about like social media, how you present yourself. What does your LinkedIn page look like? What does your Facebook page look like, right? And that's what people really focus on, right? But to me, it's not just about that, but it's also like, what are the things that are the most important to you? What are your ethics? What are your values? How do all of those things come together to actually define who you are beyond that, right? Because I think that when you start to look at that, then you start to see a more clearer vision of who you are beyond just your work. But then we can like go into that a little bit more.
Yeah, I think you touch on a really important point. What I heard from you, Tomi, is that what is at the core of what has guided you throughout your career is having a really clear sense of your purpose and your values. That is who you are, that is what you represent, and that's what you want your work to represent. Were there helpful exercises or things that you did along the way to get clear on what your purpose was and what those values were that really grounded your decisions? For example, I recently went through this very powerful exercise where we were asked to create our own personal mantras and use that as a touchstone to go back to as we were making big decisions in our lives. And I have found myself going back to that over and over again. So I don't know if there's any sort of practical guidance you have on how you got really crisp and clear on your purpose and values.
To be honest, it was very hard for me to get to that point. I was doing it, but not realizing that I was doing it. And I think that's the reason why in April, a lot of people were just kind of like having this like great resignation, in all honesty, because we were kind of forced to take a look at our lives and say, okay, this is actually not for me. And the truth is that we have been living in a society that's just kind of like go, 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 go. Whereas if you look at all of the people who are making the world move today, you know, such as the founder of Twitter or the founder of Tesla, who are prioritizing sleep, whereas the rest of us are just kind of like, you know, sleep till we are no sleep till we're dead and things like that. Whereas they're like, I need my 8 hours of sleep, you know, and it's, you know, we need to like, we took a step back because we were forced to take a step back, you know. But I think that prioritizing mental health, talking to a therapist, talking to a career coach, all of those things are really helpful into saying, these are the things that are important to me. That's why for me, I've always been very passionate about mission-driven brands. I'm at Pinterest now. It's a mission-driven company that wants to provide a better type of social media for people. Before that, I was a sleep technology company that wants to prioritize optimizing your life through better sleep. You sleep better, you sleep 8 hours, and you can perform better, right? And the truth of the matter is, everywhere that you work, you can find your own personal mission there. I worked at Bobbi Brown not because I particularly care about products. I don't care about lipstick. I don't have lipstick on at the moment, but I do care about how beauty makes human beings feel. Mm-hmm. I care about how it makes a man feels when he puts it on. I care about how it makes a woman feels when she puts it on. I care about the stories that people tell me when they go through that process. Those are the stories that I care about. I care about the dots that connect with people across different cultures from all over the world. I care about those things. These are stories that I like to tell as a professional beings, because there's so many divisions between us as human beings across different cultures. And I feel like a lot of times beauty can help us connect those dots. I can find a mission in anything. Mm-hmm. And that's why I'm able to work across so many different, whether it's sleep, whether it's footwear, whether it's all of us consume all of these things, no matter where in the world we are, no matter what walks of life we come from. And those are the stories that I love to tell. And that's why I feel like no matter what it is that you do, you can reinvent yourself. Mm-hmm. As long as you can connect to a mission and you can help tell that story.
I absolutely love that. And I see that some of our audience members are saying that they love it too. That's really inspirational. I want to build on that, Marlene, a little bit and talk about the power of storytelling, because it is a theme that both you and Tomi touched on when we met prior to this panel, and how that really is at the core of building your personal brand. So tell me a little bit about how you really honed in on your purpose and values through the work that you were doing and the stories that you were trying to tell.
All right, now we're going extemporaneous for a moment. Storytelling is critical communication. And I lived most of my life being in 90-second snippets as a reporter. So you better figure out whatever the story is, tell it in 90 seconds. It needs to be crisp, it needs to be clear and understandable. However, there are some stories that I valued more than perhaps my bosses valued, but that was part of my value set. I wanted to represent my community. I had a bully pulpit where I could influence what stories we covered and how they were covered, the wording that was used. And that's very important because it's a sleight of hand sometimes that happens, especially in the news. The choice of words you use is important, and it can show bias, it can show a lot of things. So it's important what words you use. When I think about the stories that I'm most proud of, I think about the time I went to South Dakota to cover the Lakota Indians and their horrible situation, living situation, which continues to this day. But I wanted to bring attention to it. I had to fight to go on that story. Made it to South Dakota, lived through, got the flu or something. I was sick as a dog. This is why I say no, everybody. The photographer, I love the photographer, and he carried me through this. He did the extra work. But nonetheless, when I came back with my story, which I am still proud of to this day, it was not so much appreciated by the bosses because I didn't look the part of an anchor. And so my looks took a hit, and that made them very unhappy. So you push, but you get pushed back. There are countless stories fighting in Chicago to go on the trip with Reverend Jesse Jackson. The first trip to Africa, it was massive. And unfortunately, or fortunately, because I like the Bears, it was Super Bowl year. And they didn't want to hear the story. They just didn't want to hear about it. So you have to draw your lines, figure out, what is your passion? What can you push without pushing too far, and not accept just anything that's offered up. It doesn't mean that you have to swallow whatever they're serving up, but you have to walk the line. But don't ever compromise, I think, on your values.
It's a really good point that you bring up to your story about how there are obstacles that you are going to encounter as you are building your personal brand. And not everybody is always going to be aligned with the direction that you want to go in. And so I want to switch gears a bit and talk about some of the personal obstacles each of you have faced and how you've overcome those obstacles to stay very focused on, the end goal that you're trying to achieve. So Tomi, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the ways that you've been able to overcome some of those obstacles?
I mean, in career, especially when you are a Black woman, I think that often you will face wins and losses, and that the same way you take the time to celebrate a win, it's the same way you got to take the time to take a loss and figure out how to learn from it and use it to ultimately make yourself better. I think that a lot of times when we take a stumble or we take a failure, we think that it has this detrimental damage on who we are as a person, or as who we are as a person, or what it means to our personal brand, or we cannot recuperate from it, But often it doesn't really mean that. We just we take so much value on these things that it doesn't really have an impact, on it. And so the thing is that, often when we, especially in New York City, right, you meet someone and the first thing you ask is, what do you do for a living, right? And that's such a huge thing. And I feel like we need to almost stop doing that, right? Because there's this cross between a professional brand and our personal human being to an extent, right? But we're more than that, right? And your professional brand is a professional brand. It's the work that you do, and the value that you do, and the value of it is fine. And it shouldn't cross over to the point where you feel like if you make a mistake, or if you have a failure, that you can't come back from it, and that there's no future for you beyond that, or you just can't show your face, but you still can, right? And I think that a lot of times it's so much of a crossover. You can. I think not only can you learn from your mistake, you should also learn from other people's mistakes too. That sometimes you don't have to wait for you. Just because you see a fire doesn't mean you have to put your hand in it before you realize that that's a mistake. You can also learn from people's mistakes too. But there's nothing wrong with mistakes. You have to fall to learn, and that falling does not make you doesn't make you any less deserving. We take mistakes. take so seriously in this country, especially. And it's a stepping stone, and I've been there before, where we find it so hard to like show our faces again, but it's not that most people have moved on from it.
And it's oftentimes those mistakes that you learn and grow the most from, even though in the moment it can feel very painful and hard to see a way out of it. You look back at those times and you recognize that those are the moments that you grew the most as a leader and a person. And I've also found that people want you to succeed. The people who matter most, the people you surround yourself with, want you to succeed. And if you are willing to own up to when you haven't lived your purpose or you've made a mistake, I find that people are open to hearing that and acknowledging that and viewing that as being authentically you. So there's a lot to take from those hard moments, even though in the moment we want them to go away. How about you, Marlene? What would you add to that?
Overcoming challenges and mistakes made?
Yeah.
I would suggest, let's see, of course, I've made plenty of mistakes, and on-air mistakes. I'll never forget when I stuck out my tongue in the middle of something. I thought I was off camera, never off camera. As Dan Rather said, the camera never blinks, and it doesn't. Or I made a terrible impersonation that I should not have. But I didn't know until until it was over. You push through, you live through it. As Tommy said, you keep going. There's no one out there who hasn't made a mistake. And so you just try to learn from it and keep moving. I think an important thing to do, especially if you're moving to a new job to start off, is to try to avoid some of the mistakes. Focus on the skill sets that are necessary for your new position, which may be different from the old skill sets. And so, for instance, moving from journalism to the airport system, ultimately I had to learn the AP writing style book, which was totally not a part of broadcast journalism, but they're two separate disciplines. You move into I moved into the airport system. Now we're dealing with crisis management, protocols for disasters, who's in charge. Made mistakes there, working on implementing the new goals and liquids policy. I was there at the airport. We got 24 hours notice to make that happen. And everybody in the media was waiting for us to fail. Okay, we didn't, but that's partly because of working at it to try and be prepared and to outthink them. Everything from all-day travel to international media inquiries. So just remember to focus. And I think I'm going to end with lupus. It's not a mistake, but suddenly I was diagnosed with lupus in my 30s. And I've been living with it for 35 years, been trying to get along. Bottom line is that I was in an industry that is fraught with stress and lack of sleep and long days and nights, and looking good as determined by your bosses at the time, despite facial scarring and massive hair loss. I remember being pregnant for 9 months and gaining 65 pounds due to toxemia, and then being on air and trying to cut ads and promos and realizing I was gasping for air, and I didn't even know it until I watched the replay. And then ultimately breastfeeding on the job, and that's TMI, but it's important. I mean, these are all part of the experiences, developing hypertension, emergency C-section, and an infection. But my daughter fought through, so I figured it was my time and I had to fight through as well. All I can say is there are a lot of things that will happen to you, mistakes and things that you can't plan for. You just have to keep fighting through. You just cannot be deterred, and remember your goals. I hope I answered that.
You
That's
did. And
amazing.
I think that you really built on what Tommy said earlier about you are more than your career. Your career does not make or break you as a human being. And I think it's also important that we remember to prioritize our mental well-being, our health, our emotional well-being, because at the end of the day, you only have yourself to carry through this life, whatever your job may be, whatever dream you're pursuing. And so it is important not to lose sight of that, because it can then take you off track from what you ultimately want to achieve if you reach this point where you're burnt out and you haven't taken good care of yourself. So I think it's a really important lesson for all of us to take away from this, Marlene. So thank you for sharing that. I want to talk about any advice that you have, and I'm going to give this to you, Tommy, given that you have, again, leaped to many different industries throughout your career. What advice would you give someone who is looking to break through in a new industry, a new profession, in terms of establishing their professional brand?
I mean, I think that most simple and direct is to honestly, I don't want to say like network, because I really sort of not a huge fan of that word, but if you love it, because I love it more for you. But it's really just to kind of like go for it, and just like meet lots of people, talk to lots of people. But I think that it's really honestly about just being able to connect the dot to your experience and what you can offer to the new job or the new role that you're looking forward to or that you're interested in. Obviously, for me, I've been able to jump from one type of industry to another type of industry because I've just been able to show that I'm able to. It's not easy and it hasn't always worked, but I've been able to do it eventually, because if you find the right person, because again, it is about the right person. The right person who believe in you. It's not always just about the job or the company. It's about finding the right person who you can connect to that's able to see what you're seeing. I think a lot of times we think that it's just about, this brand or this company or this job, but it's really about people, right? If you're able to connect people and they believe in what you're offering them, then I think that you're able to sell it and it's great. And it's about authenticity. I hate to just make it seem like so like cut and dry, but it really is that. It's similar to like when you're going for like an investment or whatever, and people are saying about, oh, we don't get investments. People invest in people that they know or people that they like, right? So it's the same thing when go for a job interview, and if they like who you are as a person, you tell the story of why you think this is going to work, then it should be, you're going to be able to like make it happen. I think that's really all it is.
An important part of my own journey in exploring new avenues in my career has always been to have very strong mentors in my life, because they have often been the women in my life who see more in me than I see in myself and have really pushed me to take risks in my career and to really realize my potential. So I'd love to hear from you, Marlene and Tommy, both. How important were mentors in your own career journeys as you were building your professional brands?
They were very, very important. And I've always made it a habit to know people 2 steps above me and all the way down. Not that I'm trying to stalk them and I need something out of them except their expertise. So this helps in that you get to learn all the way up and down the ladder. And it requires people to really believe in you. I have friends that believe in me, and I'm not the greatest self-promoter. And as Tommy said, I'm really not a good networker. I don't like networking. I hate to say it. It's critical. You need it. But they're the ones who push me. Also to have a family structure that's a backbone and helps you. But regarding mentors, my biggest break came from a Black female news director who reached back from my third job and pulled me into the best job I ever had. And she pushed me up and she backed me up. And that's important. And it's important to know when you lose your mentors. Say, because I had mentors who were the general managers of station or the heads of departments who left. Then you got to reassess and figure out, who now can I turn to? Who else can I get on my team? Because it's Team Marlene, and you don't want to be, you don't want to, but you don't want to be playing team ball while everybody else is playing one-on-one. Okay, so just remember that, mentors are important, and they will help you cut through that, I think.
How about you, Tommy? How do you go about finding and identifying mentors for yourself? I saw in the chat, somebody said it's really hard to find good mentors sometimes. So do you have any advice for some of our audience about how to go about seeking a strong mentor?
I mean, to be honest, I don't have any mentors. So I have a network of peers that are incredible. But I wouldn't say that I have any mentors. I have people that maybe I'm a mentor to an extent, that I support and offer opportunities to, and that's amazing. But I also have amazing peers that I connect with, and we support each other. And whenever there are opportunities, we give each other opportunities, and that's great. But I've also worked in very interesting creative fields as well. And I don't think there's always been a lot of opportunities for mentorship, especially for women and women of color. And that's just unfortunate. So yeah, I mean, I haven't had a lot of mentors, and I don't think it's necessarily, maybe if I had, I don't think it's hindered me, in all honesty. And yeah, I don't think it's hindered me.
But it does feel like and sound like you have surrounded yourself with a lot of strong peers who you are sharing, like-minded opportunities and obstacles with, so that you're working together to help each other out. And I have found that has been useful to me, as well as I've tried to establish myself in this new space of DEI. Is how do I learn from those who have been doing for a really long time to be able to accelerate where I'm at in my own journey in doing this work.
Absolutely. I might stalk Marlene though.
I think we all might.
You don't have to stalk me. We are kindred spirits, ultimately.
Yeah.
You asked me about, I think you asked us though, also about changing professions and what advice would I give? And I did want to touch on a couple of things, because I want to, if that's okay, Elizabeth.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Tell us.
I want to start by saying, continuously reassess your career, what you're doing. And also, if you're switching careers, let's make sure that you decide about family issues. Do you want to have a family? Do you want to be married? How is that going to impact things? I'm speaking directly to the ladies, not out of sexism, but out of truly the data that is emerging after COVID. Also, from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, I was noting an article, the labor market for parents changed during the pandemic. And there was a paper, Parents in a Pandemic Labor Market. It was written in February of this year. And let's just say this, it was a very bad time for mothers. I mean, it was horrible. Overall unemployment for men dropped 12% overall. For mothers, women dropped 15%. Three more points. The initial fall and recovery and employment was similar between non-parent men and women. It was smaller, however, for fathers, than for mothers and non-parents. So fewer men were affected by it than women and non-parents. Recovery prospects for women stalled. Then when the new school year opened, a whole gender gap opened up, and participation for non-parent women and men remained similar. So for mothers, this gigantic gender gap opened up. And finally, flexible working hours were more important than teleworking, apparently, and because parents needed to prioritize their children. Now, I remember when I was being courted to be a network correspondent, and to be a network correspondent, your life is not your own, and they tell you, what to do, where to go, when to go, how high to jump, basically. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted my own life. So these are things you factor in. I did not pursue that category, or that path, if you will, that career path. So think about what is your overall life going to look like when you are changing a job, and factor that in to whatever the job is that you're looking for.
I think that is very sound advice. Again, taking into account the whole person, because it's not like you are the job person and then you are the personal person. You are just you, and you have to carry those things into every aspect of your life.
Yes. You do.
How do you strike that balance for yourself, Tomi, in considering what your personal needs are as you weigh the options ahead of you for your career path?
I mean, I feel like today, thanks to Generation Z, who are always, and young millennials, who are always like demanding for things like work-life balance, things like companies making sure that they care about social justice and all of these things, we're able to like ask for more, demand for more. And so I personally have learned a lot of things that I can ask for, and I ask for those things wherever I go. Even before I accepted my current role at Pinterest, I mean, I was looking for a lot of things. I wasn't sure what company, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I was doing a great job running my Black Beauty Club and Black Beauty Market, and helping my community, and doing a fantastic job building community and talking to consumers, and working with brands that were doing amazing things for Black and brown people in beauty. So it was like, well, why would I want to join this company at the moment? But once I saw, for me, what really nailed it for me was that I'm very passionate about technology. I'm very passionate about where women are in augmented reality, artificial intelligence, and VR, right? And we're not creating the technology at the moment. And at the moment, they are the only brand that has retrained their, technology. I'm not going to go too much into that. That's not what we're here for. But I really cared about that, right? Because I wanted to be, I feel like if you can't build it, right, help influence it, right? And help tell the story, because I think to me that's important, right? If you can't build something, join and create and be a part of the wave of making some change or whatever. And I think that was important to me. So I wanted to be there and help tell that story, because for me, it's always going to be about that bigger mission. For me, I care about things. That's just who I am. That's the core of who I am. How do I make an impact? How do I leave? I think we talked about this in our initial conversations, and which was, where are you going to be in 10 years, 5 years from now? I've never liked that question. I don't know what that question means. For me, it's like, how do I continue learning? I never thought that I was going to care about AI, AR, none of that. I didn't know that I was going to care about that at all. I didn't know that I was going to care about beauty from this perspective. I don't know what I'm going to care about in 10 years. But what I do know is that I care about our society. I know I care about people, and I know that I want to make an impact. And I know that when I leave this world, I want to have done something that someone is going to care about in general, whether it's my son, just someone is going to know that I did something that was sort of impactful in some capacity, not the whole world, but just someone, right? And I think that we should just continue keeping our minds and hearts open to like learning more and challenging ourselves in some capacity. And for me, that's the alignment that I care about. That's the impact that I care about. And to me, that's what centers me. And if I can keep doing that, that's good enough for me. That's it.
I love that so much, because I have always felt pressure when people ask me that question as well. I'm like, I don't know. I don't even know what I'm going to be doing next year, you know? And so I think the important takeaway that I have from what you just said is like, you have to be a student for life, and you have to maintain your curiosity. If you know at the end of the day what drives you from your values and your purpose in life, then there are so many opportunities that will open up that we haven't even dreamed about yet, where you can have an impact. So I think that is just so inspirational, and something for all of us to take into, you know, our day today and the year ahead, is like, how do we continue to just be open, be flexible, and remain curious about all of the possibilities that life presents. Well, I'm just doing a quick time check. We are at about 12 minutes. So Gigi, I'm going to ask if we have some audience questions that Tomi and Marlene can tackle.
Yes, we do have a few questions that have come in. So the first question we have is, how do you sell yourself to an employer when you have years of experience in a certain field but are transitioning into a new industry?
Who wants to take that? Do you want to tackle that, Tomi?
I mean, yeah, I'm happy to join to tackle it. I mean, for example, a lot of companies these days will ask you to do some sort of a presentation, right? I feel like that, to me, I know some people are always kind of nervous about it, but I think it's always like a great way to kind of show what you can do. For me, it's a great way to jump in and really show that you can transfer your experience there, right? And I think it's, again, showing, like, I do a lot of research beforehand as to what the company has to offer, what the company does, where they are, so that you can speak really speak to the company, whether it's like, you know, if it's a what do you call it, Dollar Shave Club, for example, you know, and they have, you know, all of these other competitors. Research all of those things, talk about how your experience can connect the dots to all of this stuff, and then like talk like you're, for me, it's like talk like you're working there already. Ask them what their problems are, how you can help solve them, right? And then if you have to do a presentation, really do the presentation like, you know, like you are a consultant for them, and this is how you're going to solve their problem. And then after that, it's like, you know, it's their loss, so you're in.
Do your homework. That's what I'm hearing. Do your homework and act like you're already working there.
All right, so the next question we have, as a recent German Portuguese expat, it has been challenging entering the PR world in the US. How can I make sure to stand out and get a chance with English being my second language and the competition being so high at the moment?
I'll be happy to try to take that. I suggest you use those skills as a strength. And so when whatever your job duties or what's necessary for you to be good at your job, figure out a way to use your language skills and knowledge, international knowledge, as a strength in your presentations, in how you talk to people and who you meet. I'm thinking of Côte d'Ivoire. It's as the consul. I also was working elsewhere while I was being the consul, but I took the opportunity to use my position as the consul to educate people about the continent of Africa, the nation of Côte d'Ivoire, the idea of imports, exports, commodities versus finished products. There are ways to make that a strength. and I can't speak specifically to your position, but in PR, they need diversity. They need someone who has a broader knowledge than just the US. Maybe you work on a team, maybe you work on the team that's in dealing with international issues, or you try to introduce perhaps an element of your that includes your international knowledge and those skills.
I can add to that too, Monica. I don't know exactly what type of communications and PR it is that you do, but given that PR is mostly about like media relationships, I would suggest that you try to meet with editors or media people, because I feel like it's all about relationships with media. If you're able to do that, that's something that you can add on to your whatever, you know, your skills asset list or whatever. That would be really helpful. And also, if again, depending on what your expertise is or what your field is, maybe you can do some pro bono work for people. I know that you mentioned that in the past. Yeah, I think that would be really helpful. But definitely building your media relationships in the US would be an asset for you.
Thank you for that, Tommy. All right, so next question we have is, how do you go about getting people to listen when trying to make a change? I feel like no one listens, which causes frustrations.
I would posit that you listen and listen to and look at what they need and move into, if you're a candidate, and try to move into their space. It is, you know, age sometimes hinders people, but if your skills are strong and you keep working on your skills, it's my opinion that, at least for me, that has been what I use to overcome those kind of barriers when people are not listening. What can I do for you, as Tommy said? How can I fix this? Or how can I make an impact? I would ask, but I know I can't follow up, but when you say they don't listen, are they not listening to what you're presenting, or are they not listening to what your talent is? I try to figure out what they're not listening to, and the idea of why would they not listen. And maybe you might want to double back at some point, when, you know, even if you don't get the job, you know, there's always the follow-up. You know, it would be helpful if you could share with me, you know, where, you know, how I might improve, or how something I can present a different or better approach next time. I have done that. I have certainly called back and said, thank you for the opportunity. Please let me know if you saw any weaknesses or anything that you think I might be able to, you know, to work on to advance myself.
I want to +1 that, Marlene. As a hiring manager, I am so impressed when candidates come back to us and ask us, is there something I could have done differently? Or do you have any advice for me as I continue on my career journey and search for how I can improve how I'm presenting myself? And I think there's a lot of power in that. And there's a lot that you can learn from that feedback loop to help carry you forward into the next opportunity.
I think we can take a couple more questions. So the next question is, do you ever find yourself getting in your own way, talking yourself out of opportunities? And if so, how do you break that cycle?
I mean, just honestly, I know this sounds like, I'm sure you've heard this many times, because it happens to everyone. We've all been there. Mm-hmm. Just have words of affirmation for yourself. Yes. And say to yourself all the time. We all need to do this constantly, uplift ourselves. I know this sounds like so, like, you know, I was one of those people who were like, why are you doing this? But we really do need to do this. You know, you can do this. Say more yeses than nos. Unless, you know, just uplift yourself. You know, you can do this. We talk ourselves out of stuff because, you know, we are sometimes just afraid of how amazing we can actually be, but you just have to. You actually are amazing.
One of the exercises that that we went through recently as a leadership team is we were asked to create a list of epic moments in our careers that we could remember, those moments where we overcame something that seemed insurmountable at the time, a list of 3 things, 4 things. And every time you have that little voice in your head telling you, you can't do this, you're not good at this, you go back to that epic list and you remind yourself that in fact you have done it, you are capable, and you have a whole history of being able to succeed. And I have found that to be just such an effective in the moment tool when those little Jiminy Crickets are on your shoulder trying to tell you otherwise, to remind yourself that the story in your head is not actually the reality of who you are as a professional.
I concur totally. You can do this. Believe in yourself. Just believe in yourself. It doesn't mean you don't need skills, but you have to have that holistic belief that you can do something, or that when you're giving it a try, that you will give it your best try.
All right, the last question we have here is, what advice would you give someone if they've been out of their preferred field for many years due to illness, family, etc., and there's a big career gap?
I think I would suggest you try to bone up on what's happened in the interim. What are the high points? For instance, if for some odd reason I decided to go back into journalism, well, that space has changed. So ultimately, you need to know what are the main elements that have changed. I think I would read a lot and look for examples among people who are who have done that, who have made the switch, or who have come back in after long absences. See if you have any contacts that you can get into, you can get in touch with, who can also fill you in about some of it.
Yeah, and going slow, depending on what it is. I'm assuming it's communication, since we're all in the communications field here. So start with something local and just going slow, get your feet wet, and start building up. And at the same time, chat with people in your field, as she just mentioned. Just keep going slow.
Thank you so much, Tomi and Marlene, for your words of wisdom, your inspiration. I think we are all leaving this conversation feeling more assured of the path before us and loaded with lots of practical guidance on how we can start thinking about mapping our own career journeys. So I really appreciate that. Before we close, I did want to share that the ColorComm team is going to hop back on the line for those of you who are non-members. As a friend of ColorComm, I really strongly encourage you to join ColorComm for some of the programming that they produce, like this panel today, for access to information and knowledge sharing and more. Our founder, Melissa Wagner-Zorkin, and our CEO, has been a longtime ColorComm board member, and she's served as a mentor to many ColorComm members. So there's just a ton of opportunity. I would really encourage you, if you're not a member today, but you're interested in learning more, to stay on the line to hear about the team member benefits. And today, ColorComm is offering a special member discount for those of you who attended this panel, waiving the one-time initiation fee of $250. So if you are interested in learning more about this incredible organization, stay on the line, and Gigi and Gwen will tell you more about everything that is involved with ColorComm. So thank you all for your engagement and the wonderful questions. And Tomi and Marlene, you are wonderful human beings. So thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.